Good afternoon, everyone. It's Wednesday, July 26, 2023, 1600 hours. We have the Board of Commissioners Budget Workshop meeting. City Clerk, we call the roll, please.
Mayor Rostick,
Present.
Vice Mayor Kerr,
Here.
Commissioner Taglerini,
Here.
Commissioner McGeehan,
Here.
Commissioner Brooks. Here. All are present.
Thank you kindly. Now we have public comment for any items that aren't on the current agenda. If you would like to step forward and talk. Okay, City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Robin Gomez, City Manager. This is our our fourth budget hearing for the budget for fiscal year 2024, beginning October 1st, 2023 through September the 30th of 2024. We have previously discussed a lot of the items that we will be discussing again today, presenting and discussing. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. We are essentially going to go through mainly the operating budget, but we can certainly, the capital is also included, but we can discuss any parts, sections, any areas that you would like. We're going to begin with essentially our ad valorem analysis. Through this workshop, we will need pretty much a determination on behalf of the commission, some direction regarding our proposed millage rate for fiscal 2024. Again, we've discussed different numbers, different millage rates and the impacts those have on revenue for fiscal 24. But again, we will be providing some, what I would deem some better information, because we have some close to final tax roll numbers, for example. So we have better revenue estimates for next year, as well as obviously some final expense numbers for next year. And I will have also kind of co-presenting Mr. Andrew Laughlin to go over some of the detail that's in the presentation. Andrew, you wanted to add for the ad valorem requirements?
Sure. So by, I believe it's August 2nd, I need to submit to the TRIM, through the PTO portal. TRIM is the Truth in Millage Act, our proposed millage rate and our proposed first public hearing for budget adoption. So that's what I want to accomplish in this meeting. And so in that first page in this ad valorem analysis, I've provided 4 rates. So one is the rollback rate, and the bottom one is our current rate, where our millage rate has been for our fiscal year 2023. So the rollback rate is the 2.4272, current rate is 2.75. And then there's 2 rates in between, of which we would need either, if we only had a majority vote, the maximum millage rate we could do by majority only, if there was dissension among the commission, would be 2.4961. And then the maximum rate that we would need 2/3 vote, so 67%, would be 2.7457. So what we want to do by this meeting is, I'd love to have all of you on the same page as the rate that we want to have going forward, that will be posted on the TRIM notices for all the property owners. So that's in this process, that's what happens. We submit this to the property appraiser through this online TRIM portal. And then those TRIM notices go to the property owners. They're not property tax bills. You get them as property owners. And this is not a bill, but it just estimates what your taxes will be at the city's proposed millage rate. And so once we set it, we don't want to change it. In fact, you can change it and reduce it, but changing it to increase it, you would have to depending on that, I have to read through the rules, but then resend the TRIM notices, and it'd be quite an ordeal. So what I want to do is be able to have us all in agreement of what we want to set the millage rate that will go on those trim notices to those property owners within the next month or so. And so those are four potential options. It can be anything in between, but just know anything from the rollback rate to the current rate. If we didn't have consensus, there are some restrictions in what those rates can be. And so then we provide to you in that first table, okay, if we have the millage rate as one of those four, our 2023 taxable value, that's an estimate as of July 1st, that a little over $2 billion, then that shows us the differential in what our ad valorem tax revenues will be from the rollback rate to the majority vote rate maximum to the 2/3 vote maximum majority rate. And then if we just kept the rate the same as we have been for the last 4 years, keep that at the 2.75, then that's estimated tax revenues of 5.3 million. And so then that last column will show what that increase or potential decrease would be from FY23, depending on the rates that's chosen. And so that's and then the next piece is just the change in the property tax payment reduction on, let's say on average, a $700,000 property is that next table there, what that difference would be if we reduced the rate from the current rate. So if we reduced it to 2.7457, which is hardly a change from 2.75, it would be a $3 difference on your tax bill for a $700,000 property. So on and so forth. Then $178 and then $226 if it was if we use the rollback rate of the 2.4272 mils. And then the third column or the third table below is just all the historical millage rates, taxes, and what we've collected from 2015 through 2023 current. I'll pause there to see if you all have any questions on page 1. And then if not, I can just talk through a little bit on what I did on page 2 and give you kind of summary of what that's indicating. So hearing no questions on page 1, let's just go to the next page real quick on the current rate, current versus rollback rate. So if we went to the rollback rate, what is that average estimated tax savings to a property owner of the city of Madeira Beach? So what we did is we said, okay, what were all at the top table, what were all the millage rates for our fiscal year 2022 from 10/1/22 to 9/30/23, that fiscal year? What were all the millage rates applicable to City of Madeira Beach residents, property owners? And let's say then let's all use the exact same rates from 22/23 to 23/24 for next year, except move the City of Madeira Beach rate from the current rate to the rollback rate. So there's that differential in your total millage that you're paying, right? Because you're not just paying millage from the city, you're paying school board, county, juvenile welfare board, PSTA, et cetera. So then we extracted from the property appraiser website all of the assessed values, taxable value for both school and municipal, for commercial, condo, and residential properties. And these are their current values as of that 7/1 valuation. That got us to that 2.028 billion valuation, property valuation. And so that's further broken out between homesteaded properties and non-homesteaded properties, and a parcel type is commercial, condo, residential, or some mix of both. And so we provided those assessed values and the school taxable value, because you get the 50,000 for the municipal, but for school, it's only 25,000 on the exemption to get from assessed value to taxable value. And then how many parcels were those number of parcels. And then from that, we just took an average. And so you can see then in the far right column are those savings that would be yielded on an average. And obviously that varies. You know, we have some lower property values and higher, but just taking the average based on parcel type and homestead or non-homestead. I broke that out between the pinkish and the bluish. What does that property tax savings look like to your average property owner? And that's at the far right. So what you'd be paying is those third from last and second from last columns, your average property tax parcel current rate, average property tax parcel rollback rate, if we went to the rollback rate. So that's just to give you some insight as to what the implication is if we wanted to consider adopting a rate lower than the current rate, what that looks like on an average City of Madeira Beach property owner's tax bill. So I hope I gave you enough information based on the property valuation info on the property appraiser's website, as well as then what's on our trim portal regarding what kind of majority it would require from you all in order to select the millage rate. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Just for clarification for me, that every time you say rollback rate, which is in the last three, non-homestead, homestead, that's, you say rollback, that means you're applying the very top one, the 2.4272.
Correct. And yeah, and what the rollback rate means is it's whatever that property tax rate is that would yield the exact same property tax revenue for all existing properties, doesn't take into account new construction. So that's why if you had a lot of new construction and you still use the rollback rate, you can see higher property tax revenues coming into your city. But it's purely a mechanical calculation to say what would that rate need to be in order to yield the same equivalent amount of property tax revenue for existing properties in the City of Madeira Beach. And so that, since we had property value increase, that rollback rate is less than the 2.75. It's the 2.4 or something, 2.4272.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Why did we stop at the 2.4? Why didn't we take it down to 2.25 and run the numbers there? Because we had talked about that previously.
Sure, we can certainly provide that as well. And if you want me to work on that while you all deliberate and see what that
Okay, thank
that
you.
savings would be, I can do that right now.
If you can multitask. It to be this coming year yet, if we were to maintain the same city millage rate, is it still going to be the 16.2571? Or do you have any, have they
Yeah, I mean,
given you
that's-
any information on
Then
that?
that's just a big fat depend. So I don't know what the other taxing jurisdictions are doing, if they're increasing or decreasing their respective millage rates or keeping it the same. So I have no insight on that currently.
I mean, currently the county has stated that they're going to keep theirs the same. They're not looking at an increase or a decrease so far.
Would that just be the county or all?
That's the county general fund and the health department.
Okay,
I don't know about EMS. I don't, chief has any insight whether but I don't think they're looking to increase EMS. And I think the school, well, I don't think the school has been a little bit of a decrease for the last couple of years, the state portion, because there's the state and the local. But we don't know about all the other four, the last four, the smaller taxing authorities. So we know the largest one on the list is going to remain the same. And we're either going to remain the same or decrease.
right.
So Mayor, yeah, I can just plug in the 2.25 and give you the that difference column if you want to know on any particular. Did you want to know homestead residential, or do you want me to give you all 8?
Homestead residential and I guess non-homestead.
So non-homestead residential is savings of $292. And then homestead residential would be savings of $217 compared to the 189 and the 140. Sure, $292
217.
and $217.
Thank you.
And if there's any other millage rates you want me to pop in, yeah, I can do that as well.
And those are for the entire year.
Yep.
Okay, at 2.25, what is the loss of income to
Or
the
revenue.
city versus number of, I guess, residential properties or all properties?
Right.
Could you run that real quick?
A loss of $407,485.
Okay.
Compared to what we've collected in 23.
Understand.
Say that, I'm sorry, could you say that? Loss?
Loss of $407,485
7K.
if we went down to a millage rate of 2.25 mils.
Thank you for the quick calculations.
Yep.
I don't know if I can make some comments. I think in a previous meeting, I mentioned review of my own tax bill. And because the county continued to drop their millage rate along with many of the other taxing authorities, I've actually been paying a total property tax over the last 4 years less than what I paid in 4 years ago. Even though the city of Madeira Beach has kept the 2.75 constant for that period of time. Now I did some communication back and forth with Andrew to just try to understand this a little bit more, homestead versus non-homestead, the total assessed value of each. And I came up with and shared with Andrew, basically any reduction or increase or any change, the homestead properties would be about 25% of that change. So for every 25 cents of tax that's paid by a homestead property is a reduction of a dollar, basically, or 75 cents more for the non-homestead property, meaning the commercial properties or properties that, they don't qualify to be homestead property. My concern is if we reduce the rate, the millage rate, this year, if you look on the last page of your booklet here, 2023, the capital improvement, even though it's not something it's over $22 million, $22,752,500. So we're making steady improvements to the city. A lot of it we didn't decide on. It's been decided on over the years, you know, the groins, the sanitation, many of the projects that needed to be done still need to be done. We still have roads that need to be improved. We still need undergrounding, the reliability of our electrical grid. I know it feels good to say we're going to reduce the millage rate, but I feel like we're not protecting the homestead property, which in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in my mind, that is the residents, that's the people that live here year round, that vote us here on this dais to make decisions for them. You know, the state of Florida is actually, they have a grant right now where they pay $5,000 towards wind mitigation if you spend up to 15,000. That's the way I kind of feel about this, is that if the homestead resident is paying that 25 cents, they're getting $1 worth of value of improvements into their city. By reducing it, yeah, they're going to save a few bucks, but overall, the city is going to lose a much larger piece of revenue. So I think we're tasked to be good stewards of the money that we do get from the residents, and but as long as we're being good stewards, I believe we should maintain the 2.75 and get these projects done and not increase our debt. I don't want to grandstand, but Andrew, if you can help me here. On the summary of expenses, the total expenses and the total revenue, I'm coming up with a deficit of $9,435,794. And that's from page 8 and 10 summary. Now, of course, we have to have a balanced budget. So you have the fund balance net position used and the fund balance net position available, which kind of goes over my head. But basically, I'm feeling like we're taking $9.5 million out of our savings. Is that accurate, or is that?
On a net basis, yes.
Okay, so we're taking over $9 million, $9.5 million out of our savings. How can we afford to do that? I don't think it's right to try to reduce I don't want to raise it, but it's not impacting the residents overall, because the overall total millage rate it's not increasing. Or if it is, it's going to be so minute that it's not going to impact any of the residents here. So I give the floor to everyone else.
I mean, I agree. I said in past meetings that I think lowering our millage rate is not fiscally responsible. And I think when you look at the numbers, I agree with Vice Mayor Kerr. It sounds good to say I'm lowering the taxes, but when you look at what the bottom line dollar is that the homesteaded resident's really going to save, it's nothing, but it's a lot to the city. I think we should keep the millage where it is. We've been successful in keeping it there for several years now, and I think continuing that would be the right thing to do.
If I could ask, maybe Mr. Gomez can answer this. If we lost $9 million, how would that affect the current projects for the coming fiscal year? Would we have to cancel any of them?
Or find alternative revenue sources, but yes, I mean, if we had a catastrophic loss, then yeah, we wouldn't be able to proceed with them.
So we'd have to cancel some of our
Or
ongoing
delay,
projects.
really just, delay them for another year or two.
Well, we've had the same millage rate since 2019. I also agree that we should keep the same millage rate at 2.75. We do have a lot of nice projects for the city. The people of the city has entrusted us with their money, and they visibly see that the projects are underway. And if once the projects are said and done, then we can look at lowering the millage rate in the future. But I also agree.
All right, I'll offer my comments. From 2011 to 2023, we've had a 54% increase in the tax rate. During the same period, the median house value has more than doubled by 2.5 increase. Over the last year or so, all property values went up 12.5% or greater. With that, although millage rates didn't increase, the majority of people paid more for their homes, their taxes on the millage rate. Sore subject, but I'm gonna bring it up. We were gonna spend 600K on a dog park. The millage rate decrease to 2.25 is only 407K. So I disagree. I think we can do it. I think we need to tighten our belts a little bit and move forward with a decrease. I think it can be done.
If I might speak to that. That is why we have the Save Your Homes program with the homestead. So the homestead values, if they raise 12%, it doesn't matter. You're capped at 3%. If you're not part of the homestead, you're capped at 10%. Isn't that correct?
Yes, yes.
So I think people have in their budget to maintain the 2.75. I think it's fiscally irresponsible not to pay down our debt and pay our way forward, to take more out of savings than we need to for the, using Andrew's numbers here, $140 savings for homestead residential. I think that's fiscally irresponsible when you're going to be giving up hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue to the city. It's, like I said, it feels good. It's great to go back to your constituents and saying, oh, I got you a decrease. But they're only paying a small piece of all the benefits that they're getting in improving our city, and our city needs improvements. These streets need improvements. The infrastructure needs improvements. I think it was brought up about the dog park. I think the dog park is a wish list item that's way down, and I don't see it ever getting approved. I think it's a great idea, and I don't want this all to be about the dog park, but we'll maintain what we have. That infrastructure is not that important. Let's take care of all the other capital improvement projects that we have currently that we've already dedicated the money for, like the groins and the other projects that are listed at, you can see them in the capital improvement section. It makes no sense to spend our savings when we don't have to, when it's very little benefit to the homestead resident.
Back to that loss of 9 million. Was that for the mayor's request of 2.25, or is that for the rollback rate of 2.42?
I believe the way the budget's set, that's at the current rate of 2.75. So we assumed the ad valorem revenues of the 5,299,799. I can confirm that.
City manager, if you don't mind going to page 8 and then page 10, you can kind of see where I'm getting those numbers from.
So yeah, our budgeted ad valorem taxes are in line with current rate at 2.75 mils. So that loss would, if we went to say 2.25 mils, then we'd have to reduce that revenue number, and that would increase the deficit that would need to be funded by existing reserves.
By about 9 million, is that where that number came from?
Well, the current, the 9 million, where that's coming from is the and that on item 4A, page 12, really presents it
Budget,
well
right.
for all funds.
Across all funds.
It summarizes here. The total expenses are 4,623,707, but we only have a total revenue of 31,187,913.
Right.
So that leaves a deficit of $9,435,794.
That's right.
So we have to pick up that deficit somewhere. We either have to borrow it, we have to pull it from savings. It doesn't come out of thin air. And that's based on the revenue stream. That 31 million of revenue is based on the 2.75. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep,
So if we reduced it, that difference would become bigger.
correct.
Thank you.
And Mayor and Commissioner, just wanted to add, I had up on the screen, back to homesteaded properties on the property appraiser's webpage, there is this information, the Save Our Homes annual increase. So this shows the consumer price index increases and versus the cap. The cap, as was stated, for a homesteaded property. Again, homesteaded means you own your home and you live in it, and then you receive the homesteaded exemptions on the valuation of your property. These are the historical, again, the CPI versus the 3% homestead cap, and essentially twice in the last 12 years. And this year may be the third year in the last 13 years where the CPI is above the cap. It likely will be, just as it was for the current year. But again, that is still a max of 3%. You can see in prior years, it was under 3%. It was as low as a 0.1%. Well, that was right after the housing bubble crash and et cetera in 2008 and 9. So just so that everybody's aware, this information anybody can pull this up on the property appraiser site.
So it would be any decrease to the millage rate would benefit the non-homestead properties 3 times what it would benefit the homestead residents, the people that live here over 6 months a year and claim this property as their home.
Is that an accurate statement?
Well, yes, and evidenced by the property tax analysis, because you see non-homestead properties only, that difference column is higher than the homestead properties only difference column.
Yeah, the maximum for non-homesteaded is 10, a 10% increase in valuation.
And so and in general, the homesteaded properties, their taxable value, I mean, their value is they're limited to 3% cap versus the 10% cap. So kind of on the whole, that property, that taxable value per property is essentially less than non-homestead on the average. And so the higher your property value, and then the lower your millage rate, the greater the impact that is per parcel.
I just have to believe, looking at the line items in the budget, I think there's items that we can trim there without having to go to the savings to get the 6-8 million or whatever that number is there. We're only talking 407K to give people a break. So I just think that we could drill it down. I think it's doable. That's my 2 cents on that.
Well, just to explain that 9 million deficit a little more on page 12. So in the stormwater fund, that's where it's the most significant. And we do have about 5 million and change remaining from unspent debt proceeds from that 2019 issuance. I believe I mentioned that in a prior budget workshop. So a lot of that deficit does relate to that. Plus the general fund subsidizes the stormwater fund for debt service. I didn't put those transfers in between general fund and these other funds yet. I'm going to do that before, as we finalize everything. I wanted to just show you the depiction by fund before any subsidizing from one fund to the next, right? So the stormwater fund can't survive on its own to pay its own debt service and its operating costs solely with its charges for services revenue from the stormwater fee assessed. It can cover its own operating expenditures, but when you add debt service to it, it needs that funding from the general fund. So we do an annual transfer. So that's not captured there. And then we have $8,350,000 budgeted in capital outlay for stormwater projects for fiscal year 24. And so that cumulative results in a $6.65 million deficit. Some of that would be funded from the general fund, and then largely the remaining balance is cash that we already have on hand that we just haven't spent yet from that 2019 debt proceeds. The other biggest offender is, if I call it an offender, is the Archibald Park Fund, where it's got 4.835 million of capital projects. And so its fund balance carryover is almost 3.1 million. So unless you all want to decide to scrap projects, I'll need to also move general fund dollars into Archibald because it doesn't even have sufficient fund balance to cover that deficit. So we'll move some general fund money into the Archibald Park to help fund that difference. And what's mostly attributable to that is the Beach Growings Renourishment Project. We're getting 1.75 million in grant funding, which is great, but that's only a half match. So the city's having to come out of pocket for 1.75 million. And that's no chump change, right? And that's I think the biggest project in Archibald. And again, your capital project listing is at the end. We can go through that in greater detail. And then typically the general fund, which is now operating at a surplus at 2,294,000. But again, we're going to have to move some general fund money to the Archibald Park Fund to fund that, help fund some of that $3 million deficit that the Archibald Park existing reserves can't fully cover. And then the general fund will have to move some money to stormwater fund, as I mentioned, to cover debt service. The next one is the local option sales tax funds. We've got 2.83 million in capital projects budgeted for FY24 with only about 725,000 of revenue. So that's, we get the local option sales taxes to the city, and those have accumulated, and we do have some available fund balance in the local option sales tax fund, but again, not the general fund will have to provide some assistance to the lost fund as well. And so between the stormwater fund, the lost fund, and the Archibald Park Fund, those are the three that's creating this $9 million deficit. Less concerning on the stormwater side with, we've already issued the debt. We've got 5 million and change of unspent debt proceeds. But then again, we also, if you look at that capital side, we've got a multi-year capital improvement plan. And so you see out in 26, 25, 26, 27, there's some big numbers there as well, of which then we can issue debt. At this point, I don't see the need to issue debt to fund this $9 million balance because we've already issued that debt before in using those proceeds. Plus, we do have sufficient reserves from the general fund to help to transfer money, and then some reserves in the Archibald and local option sales tax fund to cover the rest. So I don't see a need to issue debt, but again, the deficit does look large because we do have an aggressive capital improvement plan, not only in 24, but in future years. So if we want to strategize a millage reduction plan, that's probably where we want to look, is to say, I don't want to, let's not fund certain capital projects because those are the big bites of the apple. But if we all feel that those are important, then we do have to face the financial reality that we need the revenue sources over time to help fund them.
My gratitude to Linda Cheney for getting us to Groins and getting us that $1.75 million expense that we have in this coming budget.
Yep.
But we have to cover it. The following year, we have 22,752,000 this year, and then we have over 12 million the following year. 8 million the following year, 8 million the following year. I don't want to nickel and dime our millage rate. I don't want to increase it, but I don't want to nickel and dime it and not get these things done. That's just the way I stand.
Okay, so then, Andrew, the next step regarding the millage rate is.
Yeah, so the next step is try to gain consensus. I'm not sure we're going to get unanimous consensus from what I'm hearing so far, but see what consensus we do have to at least establish a preliminary millage rate to put on trim notices that I need to submit, by the end of July.
Public comment, would you like to come up?
Several years ago, I was part of a citizen budget review committee that was with the city commission authorized, and Mrs. Brooks was on it with me. And we struggled with these same numbers, and we knew about the capital improvements that the city needed. You have projects coming up that are got to be paid over the next 10, 20 years. We are seeing fruition of that. When we had to make recommendation, and we did make a recommendation to increase the millage rate from 2.25 to 2.75. It was 0.5 that we recommended at that time because we knew the capital improvements that needed to be made. It's always nice, and St. Petersburg, this, as other cities do, they do a small decrease. I mean, like it's 1/100 of a point or something like that, so they can say, well, we decreased. But they were kicking the can down the road, and you look at what the sewage treatment issues that they had come up with, sewage being released into the bay, and they had some serious issues. They've been kicking the can down the road for years and years and years. So, no one likes paying taxes, especially as you see your property valuation goes up, your taxes are going to go up anyways. But for the improvements of the city, I would recommend to keep it the same.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
So if we don't have per the first page of the presentation, then we would be looking, as Andrew stated, it doesn't appear we would have a consensus, then we would be looking at a 2/3, the millage rate at the 2.7457.
Yeah. I think we haven't heard from Commissioner Taglerini yet, so based on his thoughts, that would either dictate if the direction of a majority or 2/3.
Well, I was leaning towards the rollback rate myself. Seems like that wasn't as extreme as what the mayor was suggesting of 2.25, and maybe wouldn't hit us as hard. I do think we could tighten our budget enough, some, right? But I also know we have a lot of projects that I and my constituents are pretty fond of.
I could go with that, the 2.4, what you're recommending. I could agree with that.
I was leaning towards that. I thought it seemed like with a comparison analysis that you did at the end, it wouldn't be too much to tighten our belts to make that happen.
I personally just think that when you look at Madeira Beach and the median cost of homes here, you're talking about reducing. I'm not pretending that $18 is no money, but depending on where you go, you're talking $13 a month, $18 a month. I just don't see where that is a significant give back to the community, but it is a significant amount of money for the city. And for the dog park, that is not anything we have voted on. It is just something that is out there that is being researched for donations, grants, et cetera. So we're talking about infrastructure, the things that really matter in the city. And the city's been in a position in the past when we did not have the money. I stand by, I believe that we need to stay where we are.
I think we're,
So, yeah, it sounds like we've got 3 votes more favorable to the current rate. And then Mayor Rosteck, would accommodate the rollback rate. And then Commissioner Taglerini, you would either
rollback, right?
be only in favor of the rollback rate, or the other option would be if you'd be comfortable with the 2/3 vote maximum millage rate of 2.7457. And then if not, then it sounds like we've got a 3-2 split. And then if we have a 3-2 split, I think the highest then we can do is the majority vote maximum millage rate allowed of 2.4961.
Yes.
That's what I was,
Yep.
that's where I was. So you read me correctly.
Okay.
All right.
I just have to say, I think we're making a huge mistake. We're not helping the residents at all by decreasing at $140 or whatever it is. We're taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the budget, which means is we're either going to have to cut capital expenditures, and the dog park's not in there, is it?
For next, yeah, I think we have a 200,000 for
I
next
think we
year.
budget for
But it was 200,000.
Well,
All right, so we're probably going to spend a decent portion of that just maintaining the dog park where it is. It's not,
well,
we don't have a $800,000 expenditure here on capital expenses on a dog park. So there isn't, I don't see the fat that we want to try to trim. That's not going to hurt the residents, the constituents that put you up here. I'm sorry, I'm a little passionate over this because I think it's just a silly thing to be able to go back to our neighbors and say, well, we've reduced your rate. Because you've actually added debt, possible debt, or reduced what we're going to provide. Interest rates are going up. So if we do have to borrow, it's not a favorable time to borrow. I just think that I'm sorry, I know I'm a little, get off my soapbox, but I just feel that passionate about this. It's not, I haven't paid any more property taxes over the last 4 years than I did 4 years ago. My property value has nearly doubled in that time. It's not impacting, it's not hurting the residents that call this home, that live here over 6 months a year, that are registered to vote and put you up here. It's not hurting them. I'm beside myself. I'm sorry.
I agree with Vice Mayor Kerr 100%.
I also agree with Vice Mayor Kerr.
So I guess at this point, then we can advertise the majority vote or the rollback rate. But I think it would appear to me that it would be the majority. Sounds like a majority vote, which isn't a gigantic difference from the rollback rate.
Right.
All right. Any other for the millage rate?
So I think we need to have further discussion because taking the rate back to 2.49 is just ridiculous. The 2/3 vote maximum millage at 2.7457, even though I don't want to reduce it at all, is far better than taking it back to going from collecting $550,000 to 66. I mean, our residents are gonna suffer when the taxes get rolled back. Because if you think about it like this, you think about rolling the taxes back, what you're going to take in less this coming year. That's not just this coming year, it's the next year and the next year. So when you're looking at the budget going out, you have to account for every year going out, not just this year coming. So it's that much less money we're gonna have this coming year, the next year, the next year. And if you're not going to have that reduction in income each year coming forward, that means you're going to come back here next year and raise the millage rate. Where just leaving it the same, and I have said this once before, let's just see how things go. Let's let it ride this 1 year and come back next year and see where's our economy, where, it's a presidential year coming up. Let's see how those things play out. And maybe next year, it is the time to reduce taxes. I have a hard time with that, but you never know. But this year, I just think reducing them is the wrong thing to do when you're telling residents we're going to have to change paving their road or fixing the park, or Madeira Beach is beautiful. We want to keep it beautiful. If we reduce the taxes, something has to go. Who's going to decide on that? Is it your district, my district, his district? Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I really think, I understand that everybody has their own thoughts and I get it, but I don't think at the end of the day, the amount of money it's going to save an individual homesteader over what it's going to cost the city weighs out.
I agree with also $13 to $15 a month. I mean, it is a lot of money for some people, but to keep our millage rate at 2.75 until we get the projects done, I think is responsible. And I think we should keep it the same. And also, people brought up Mayor, trimming the fat. I'm open for discussion about where we're going to trim the fat at, I mean, if we can possibly pull that off, and you let me know before we make a vote. I'm uncomfortable making a vote until, you show the fat that's being trimmed and where we could do that at. I mean, but right now I agree with Commissioner Brooks that this year we should keep it at 2.75. The next year, see how it goes from there. I mean, that amount of money, what's the rush? Let's get our projects done. Thank you.
I'm already compromising. I wanted 2.42. So the majority of 2.49 is where I'm willing to go.
I agree with Commissioner Tagliarini. I mean, we've already wasted 16.5K on the drawings, renditions for the dog park. And I'm not trying to take shots at anybody. We buy a boat for code enforcement, although their funds are separate, but we buy a boat, we don't do a marine survey and needs a new motor for $20,000. So there is a whole lot of fat there, and we have a whole lot of looking closely at things. And the one comment I did want to make about the budget items, and I've asked about this before, is please put this stuff in the landscape mode so it's not in a 2-point font where we can't decipher the numbers. And I mean, it's so small, you can't read it. But I think there's ways that we can accomplish this. It's going to take some work. We're talking $407,000 to bring it down to 2.25, I think is what Andrew had run those numbers. $407,000 is not going to break the bank or kill the city.
Proceed. But that's what we will advertise it then. It would appear at this point at the majority vote, 2.4961. And so at the next workshop, the budget will be, the difference will be that $500,000 less keep in mind, just the general fund revenue. And again, just the ad valorem tax rate. We do collect obviously revenue from many sources, different taxes, fees, charges for services, et cetera. But this is only, it's impacting primarily the general fund. But as Mr. Laughlin stated, the general fund does subsidize or make payments to the other funds, mainly for a variety of projects. So we will obviously make those decisions where to reduce the approximately $500,000 or 490,000. I think we've gone over the budget in the last several workshops regarding individual line items. And again, as some of the comments regarding the revenues that we do receive come from a variety of different sources. We're also looking to make sure that we're receiving obviously every penny that we are entitled to. But we do have to budget in a fiscally responsive manner, and obviously is in some fiscally responsive conservative manner, so that we do again have enough revenue to cover the expenses. So just to go over some of our other revenues as we have before, we are providing to the general fund using some of the ARPA, the remaining ARPA balance that we do have to spend by December 31st of 2024. So the end of next year, we are recording the grant proceeds from the county or from the state, but through the county, that are primarily for our road projects. Some of our other larger revenues, we collect obviously franchise fees and other taxes on our utilities, water, electricity. Those tend to be some of our larger revenue sources, including the communication service tax from the state of Florida. And I don't know if you have any questions regarding any of them. We obviously do collect various revenues in our recreation operations for specific services that are provided: after school care, summer camps, some for field rentals, et cetera. And in our fire department, as we do have a contract to provide the services with the Reddingtons, we are funded from those entities to cover those geographic areas, as well as from Pinellas County to cover all of or a portion of our EMS expenses. And you'll see at the very end of our general fund at the end of page 16, I think it is. Thank you. 16, the appropriation, which is not a capital project, but an appropriation from the state, the 1.55 million to pay for the dredging at Johns Pass. It's listed at 1.5 million, as we will likely spend about the $56,000 this fiscal year, and then the remaining next fiscal year. Don't believe we will start dredging anytime prior to November. So any questions on general fund revenues?
I just had a quick comment on the impact fees residential, which we can talk about at a later spot, but I thought we were going to bring that up for more discussions with Jerry Murphy and whether we want to maintain a residential impact fee or not. I mean, if we want to give the residents a break, if they want to improve their home, let's take away the residential impact fee.
We will definitely bring that back. We have to separately account for the impact fees. Right, and so we're recording them in separate funds.
Yep, we created a separate fund to record the revenue. We haven't budgeted any expenditures against it. The initial thought was to accumulate funding in each of those buckets for public safety, culture and recreation, transportation. So we didn't budget anything in 2024 from an expenditure perspective. Let that balance accumulate. But we could always make an amendment during FY 24 if there's a project that we want to fund with those impact fee proceeds.
Oh, my point isn't, I mean, the way you're accounting for it is perfect. I'm not suggesting that we spend it. I'm suggesting that we stop taking the revenue.
Residential.
from Residential,
Right.
commercial will be different.
So yeah, different conversation, but
Yeah.
yeah, if we want to workshop that or.
And then general fund expenditures, again, we list them by category, and we do spend the majority of on our operating expenditures, followed by personnel in our general fund. And of course, as I said, we break it out by department. You can see the page 18, the breakout by the departments for expenditures, and of course, for each departments or areas, and each department area does have a corresponding detail of line items included for each expenditure, whether personnel, other operating, et cetera. And there is a little bit of the history of, well, the actual for fiscal 22, what was budgeted for the current year, what's projected for the current year, and then the proposed budget for the following year. Again, at the last workshop, did go over a couple of just some of the changes from one year to the next. I mean, the biggest change, at least in the fire department, where we are adding the 3 additional positions to staff each of the shifts with an additional personnel, as has been recommended by the National Fire Protection Administration or agency from a few years ago, and to just have better coverage regarding any potential medical fire related incidents. I think in my budget and the city manager, as I stated before, did put the capital project for the honor court. As I stated also, we have received a $25,000 donation from the American Legion for that project, and we're looking to begin later this year and then conclude that hopefully by the end of the calendar year. So that's why you see a sizable spike. Also moved the part-time HR position into my department, and moved what was the part-time or the balance of the IT under my department. Those areas, those are still listed in the budget. You just won't see the salaries in there. The salaries are in the city manager's budget, and they are lower than what we had previously been paying specifically for the HR position. I'm sorry, the IT remains the same for that position, and no other, other than, I think, Andrew, if you wanted to touch a little bit, other than the increases so this budget includes a 5%, just a general wage increase for all employees, and as increases to some of the benefits coverages, specifically for health, or the medical for health, which is health, dental, and vision. And it includes a proposal to cover 50% of any dependent medical coverage as well.
That's right. And what's left is the conversion of certain employees from ICMA to FRS. That'll increase the cost a bit. We should have that information by perhaps mid-August. And so it'll potentially get in the updated budget book for the end of August, if not then for September. And then I'm also going to go through, I mentioned providing those general fund transfers. And so We'll have some transfer activity between the general fund and other funds for those that are operating at a larger deficit that don't have sufficient reserves to cover it. And then the last is a cost allocation plan between the general fund and the other funds that use general fund resources. So we just base that on prior year, but we go through an exercise where we actually take square footage of building, time spent by employees, for the general fund employees working on marina related accounting tasks, for example, and charge an applicable allocable portion based on what's in our cost allocation worksheet. So I'm going to finish going through that, and that'll slightly update some of the transfer numbers between general fund and other funds. So those are relatively minor changes that'll be coming through the next version.
Mr. Gomez, you had mentioned a 5% salary increase. Is that just for hourly employees?
That's all employees.
That's all, including the fire department?
So the fire has the per their collective bargaining agreement. It's already listed in there, the 6%, but we are looking to make the adjustment, as I had shared before, to increase their steps from 3 to 5% in the third year of their agreement. We will bring back to you at the next workshop or the comparisons of salaries among the county for fire to show that.
I asked just for kicks. I did a search and cost of living increase by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater cost increases 7%. And just thought I'd bring that to the board's attention. We're offering a 5%, but to live in our Tampa Bay area, the government has survey shows that it's 7% increase, although nationwide it's 3%. But to live here.
That would be another good example of why we shouldn't lower our millage rate. I was just thinking, because the dog park's not a part of this, but we did discuss, and Mayor, you brought it up, fire department is going to be adding someone. Maybe we should be giving more raises. We're talking about healthcare and all of those things. If we go down on our millage rate, that $400,000 or whatever the number is, depending on where we're at, any loss is money that we can be reinvesting, not just into our infrastructure, but into our employees. Because we discussed in past meetings wanting Madeira Beach to be a place that they wanted to come and stay, make it a home, work here, not rotate through employees. So maybe we could look at it a little bit differently yet, in that the benefit of keeping our millage rate would also benefit our staff. Just a thought.
No, excellent. Do we have the numbers of what this is going to cost? For the 3 personnel and then the healthcare benefits for the dependents? Do we have those numbers to take?
The additional for the firefighters, I think it was 250,000, 260. What, chief?
Is that in the budget?
It's in the budget right now. 275 is what it sounded like.
Yeah, it's roughly 275,000.
For the 3 additional fire positions. The health benefits alone are, I think, 180 or 200,000. Additional.
You're saying the increase in health benefits?
Yes, well, the total citywide, we don't know how many dependents we may have more sign up than we've ever had. We had 9 for the current year. And if it's just those 9, again, paying 50%, I think was almost about $70,000 just for the 9. So expanding that, doubling or tripling, now we're looking at, that's why you see in the group, just so that I get it correct, the group insurance, you will see the sizable increases because we did budget. In essence, we are budgeting 20,000 per employee for the group insurance. The current year we budgeted 12,000.
In the current year, it's 12,500. Yeah. So we bumped that up to 20.
To cover that additional cost. So to give you an exact number for that, if it's, I mean, just around 7,000, potentially as many as 30, just to be conservatively 30 employees, it's 210,000. Plus the 275 for the additional fire personnel
Plus, we agreed to
Plus-
change their pension benefits.
and the
which is-
pension, which we do not know the total cost yet.
But it's over 200,000.
Correct. And again, I mean, we combine that and it's spread out across multiple funds. So everything that I just stated, those dollar amounts are not just in the general fund because of course it crosses all funds. The millage rate, of course, impacts the general fund mainly, but again, we're not making transfers from the general fund to the enterprise funds, the marina or the parking to pay for salaries or the health benefits. We're making transfers to cover the capital projects where there are deficits, where those, and again, mainly the stormwater and the Archibald Park Fund, as we discussed, that do not have enough revenue to pay for those projects.
So am I to understand that a 6% wage increase would not be out of the question if we had the funds for that? I'm just asking a general question, my colleagues.
What have we done year over year?
For the current year, it was 5%. I believe in the prior year. For the current year, it's a 5%, but prior years, 3 to 4%, or, I mean, it kind of varied 3 or 4, which is kind of typically what cities have done historically.
I can only speak for last year. We were at 3. I wanted 9. It was negotiated down to 5.
Well, I totally agree about giving it back to our employees. We already know that one of the hardest positions to fill is sanitation. We don't want to, lower that. Of course, we don't want to lower anything. I mean, I'm willing to budge. Why can't we do the 2.7457 and have a vote on that, and then we can give that back to our employees?
I don't know if this.
Because you're the one that brought up the cost of living expense.
I'm not sure. I'm not
So
sure if
you
it
want-
works
you wanted
this way,
to-
but I would be willing to negotiate if we could secure a higher raise.
Yeah.
Well, I
for
think
our
it's off the
employees.
table without it.
So why, that would be a happy
Everything
compromise.
that we do from now on, if we have this millage rate reduced, it's gonna be, can't afford it.
Yeah.
Well, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
I agree exactly with what Commissioner Brooks has said. I would like to adjust my position to keep the millage rate where it is at 2.75. However, we have to stop the wasteful spending, that we are accountable to the citizens and we're accountable to the employees, because the employees that we have are good employees and we want to keep them. So we have to have those incentives to keep them here. So
But I would only change my opinion on the millage rate to 2.75 with assurance that we would have a consensus on a 6% raise for our across the board employees.
if we can afford it.
I think we will calculate and bring it back to you. I think if you keep the same millage rate, we can manage that to make that work. And from my perspective, I think you just made our employees a little much happier than they were a few minutes ago. So I certainly appreciate that. Thank you. But we can certainly work that if we then advertise at 2.75.
Is that a consensus on the wage
What
increase?
it kinda
Yes.
sounds like.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to be clear. We're going to propose a wage increase, the 6%, and we're going to use a millage rate of 2.75 mils. And remember, you have to vote on that in September,
In September.
and that needs to be unanimous. If it's not, I'm in big trouble. And I don't want to go remailing trim notices. So,
You have my word,
all right, thank you.
Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a minute to thank Commissioner Taglerini and Mayor Rostek for reconsidering.
We're a team.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you on behalf of, I mean, I think you just made, again, employees very happy and so that makes it that much better. Appreciate the support as always. Just continuing with, or I think we're finished, but no, I'm just kidding.
I did
You
have a question. Can I have a
Yes.
question? Remind me. Need my glasses, hold on. Page 18 and 19 regarding John's Pass Village. What those outflows are, what, they're under fire, which is the number one expenditure. John's Pass Village is number two. I'm just trying to get my head around why that is. And it looks like with the explanation on 19, it's maybe capital expense of some sort. I'm not following it.
Okay,
On which page? Which
you
page?
said page 18 and 19.
I think
Yeah.
Mayor Rostick just
Yeah.
hit it on the head. Is
Well-
that the dredging?
Yeah, the 1.5 million under John's Pass Village, we're under, on page 19, excuse me, about halfway down. Under revenues, inflows and outflows, that's the dredging amount, 1.5 million. It's showing, again, the revenue that's coming in and then the expense going out. There's an additional 400,000. I know Megan, if you can, for other John's Pass, I mean, we have basic maintenance that we do out there, also that we budget under John's Pass.
Right, but that's more in the
Yeah.
200,000 range.
Yes, but, so let me.
And then the non-departmental, what's in that bucket?
So that's where we record all of our general revenues that aren't specifically related to another department. On the expenses side, it's the same concept, kind of citywide, that don't really apply to a particular department, like a lot of our insurances.
Okay, other, okay.
And if I'm, sorry, Vice Mayor, to interrupt, the 1.5 million for the dredging, 450,000 capital for the Johns Pass Park parking lot to mill and resurface and reconfigure, just improvements at that parking lot on the west side of the bridge at the pass. So that's the 1.950 in expenditures.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as Mr. Laughlin said, for non-departmental, it's sort of the catch-all, as he stated, for those items that do not fall into a department. As I stated at the prior workshop, we are only adding the positions in the fire department. The page all the way down toward the end of the document, page 48 lists the personnel. Excuse me, the funded positions and personnel, a little bit of the historical going back to 2017, just to show. And again, from the current year to next year, just the additional, we have reduced a position in the building fund that we were not, just had not filled and we're not using. But overall, really not a significant change other than those three positions. And then each and after that page, as you continue from 49 on, it's a list by department or by area of the job titles, the positions that we have, and the number of personnel in each job classification. So for example, in fire, we have 5 firefighter paramedics, and we have 2 firefighter driver paramedics and 5 firefighter paramedics. So that's just some additional details on all the data that we have.
If I may, I'm going to jump back. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things and ask some questions on page 31. Halfway down, interest earnings on the revenue side.
That's another larger, about 700,000.
It appears that that's jumping up, I guess, because the interest rates have gone up and we do have, we're sitting on like you said, the 5 million for that's basically allocated for storm water, but it hasn't been spent yet?
Correct.
Okay. And
I think
then,
we've had, I mean, our banking agreement has yielded some pretty good interest earnings, and I think Andrew can.
no, it's
Got-
won-
Yeah,
wonderful.
we got that interest from the bank, and then we also run a local government investment pool, which year and a half ago was barely earning 20 basis points. Now it's like 5-something%. So it's been very significant.
Wonderful. Did have a question on page 32, the general insurance, about a third of the way down. Looks like that's really gone up. Why? Is that an accounting thing where you moved insurance from another area, or is it just, that's what insurance is
No,
doing?
that's the insurance, and mainly our property insurance has drastically increased, and we're looking at anywhere from approximately as low as an 8% to as high as I think 24% increase in just property insurance. And so we asked our insurance company to take another look and provide us a couple of options, which they have. We're also looking at certain items, whether we do need to insure them or not, let alone the valuations that they provided. Some of the valuations were low, and so they do need to be adjusted, and that's the reason for the increase. But even if we, for example, we had discussed whether to insure the concession building out here, which hopefully will be replaced, but not for a couple of years. But does that need to be insured? The bell tower. I mean, I know the bell tower is kind of the iconic when you're on Village Boulevard. If it gets destroyed, do we rebuild it as is? We do have a plan to kind of improve that area, but I mean, we haven't removed anything right now. It's just a matter of taking a much more in-depth review of all of our property. They have a category for property in the open. So for example, here at this park, they broke out between the kind of the recreational property in the open. So the fencing, the lighting, I mean, the lighting is important, and that is just as the fencing, the improvements that have been made, the fountain that's out here, the reflection pool, and then certainly some other items that are out here, flag poles and street lights, and to what level do you insure those, the actual replacement cost, or so that's what we've been having discussions to review that, so we're not hit with a sizable increase. But there's little we can do to control it.
Does the state offer any insurance funds? I mean, insurance programs? Or,
I think the league did
Municipal.
it one time, and the Florida League of Cities, but we're part of, and I can never remember the name of the insurance company, but it is a group where a lot of other cities and counties are members. I think there's over PRM, thank you. There's over 100 cities and counties that are members. So it's a pool. And we use them for all of our property and liability insurance.
yeah, I would think that deserves more discussion, because like you mentioned, I mean, the fountain, we're redoing the fountain right now. Some things, maybe we should allocate a certain amount of funding into a self-insured program. So whether it's the bell tower or it's the fountain, probability, the concession stand's not going to burn down the same time that,
Well, I don't know.
but it could be a storm. I don't know.
Right.
So it's catastrophic, but, when you're dealing with a $50 million budget or $40 million budget, sometimes self-insurance might be
Sure.
something to consider. What else did I have? I'm sorry. I might. Page 34, the Gulf Boulevard undergrounding. So that's money that's allocated that we have in savings, or is that debt, or what is that? That 4.7, 4.8 million in the budget, but it's only 384,000 projected.
Yeah, I think that's what we've had budgeted all along to complete it. We we'll be spending, I mean, a considerable amount this year, the rest of this year, but
It's quite a bit of difference. I kind of remember
Right.
it was like a $300,000 discussion when we were talking, I guess was it Duke?
For the undergrounding project.
Yeah,
I think we're making a major push spending money.
and they were getting
This last quarter.
that number down, they were. But I just
Yes.
didn't understand the 4.8 million. I don't know.
well, we were expecting it to be completed this year, but it's not going to be completed this year. Well, we're hoping for next year, but have to,
We have $1
we
million
can look at,
in next
yeah, $1
year.
million for next year. And look at it in more detail and
Yeah,
provide
if you
that
don't mind
back to you.
highlighting that, maybe talk to us about that.
Sure. I know we did receive, for that project, we did receive our reimbursement from the county
Oh, good.
earlier today for the cost for that, and that was a little over 2.5 million or that we received in reimbursement for that. So
It's wonderful.
that's good news.
Yeah, that's great news.
And then we will be eligible for another reimbursement next, I think, starting January. And that's about another $1 million for that as well.
Okay, 35, 3/4 of the way down, maintenance, grounds and parks. Is that because we added someone to that department? It went from 45 to 80,000, basically.
So you said page 35.
Page 35, 008 at the end. 3/4 of the way down.
So I think it went up from 80,000 budgeted to 85,000.
Oh, okay, I was looking at the 22, went from 44,000 up to 80, and it just kind of stayed
That,
through.
yeah,
stayed
that's
ar- stayed
the
around 80.
maintenance of,
Kind of added somebody.
no, I think just the additional maintenance in our grounds and parks. And if you recall, last year's budget discussion was to add just more for the maintenance here, Rock Park, and through certain areas throughout the city. So that's where we put a little bit of the increase. We budgeted 300,000 for maintenance for the park here alone. And then just increase this budget, which is in the recreation department as well.
Okay. And last question, page 38. Our debt service fund. How much debt do we currently have and at what interest rate? Do you know offhand, roughly?
Sure, I mean, that's in the financial statements. I can pull that.
No, we did all that Crystal Island roadway
Right, so-
improvements, and that's
So there's-
probably the bulk of it, right?
Yes, I think the majority of it. And so it's several million.
There was like
Still.
15 million when they took that out, I
Correct.
think. But it was at a really great rate. You don't want to pay it off right now. You can't borrow at that rate.
Not anymore.
So our outstanding debt. We've got series 2013 debt. Remaining balance of 3,855,000. And then that's it for the governmental activities. And then we've got the stormwater, the revenue bonds, series 2019. That remaining balance is 13,938,000 as of 9/30/22. And then we did a refunding in 2020. That balance is 3,613,000. The interest rate on that 2020 refunding is very low. The 2013 was the construction of the city center project, which is reconstruction of City Hall, Rec Center, Fire Station, and park amenities. Interest rates ranging from 4% to 5%. Then your series 2019 was for this roadway and stormwater improvements, interest rate of 3.07%.
That was the 15 million.
That was it. Well, yeah, it was issued for 15,063,000. We're down about 13 million and change. as of this past fiscal year. And then the series 2020, we got that interest rate at 1.73% when rates were pretty low.
Wow, should have borrowed more when we had the chance.
What was the amount of that issue? Oops.
So
Or was that a?
that was in the amount of $4,442,000, that refunding. And that current balance is now $3,613,000.
So roughly, we're
20.
21 million in debt.
Approximately.
14. Yeah, about 21 million or so, yeah.
Great, thank you.
And if any other questions regarding any aspect or even any of the capital projects, we'll kind of provide some more details on the undergrounding numbers. And certainly put it all together with the 2.75 millage rate and the 6% for salary increases. Anything. And just so to be, I'm not saying this I should probably say it on a one-on-one. I have an agreement with the commission, so my salary is separate from the 6%. So to be clear.
Okay.
Because I know I get comments from people, why are you getting a 6% raise as well? You're already but anyway.
I'm sure.
So I'll submit that on the trim submission due the very beginning of August, 2.75 mils, and then we'll make our first public hearing date, because that also gets advertised on the trim notice, which means we don't have to advertise for the first public hearing, we do for the second. And then we'll make, we cannot have that public hearing date the same as the school board or the county. The school board is September 12th. Or the county is September 7th, so we're thinking just doing Wednesdays, the 13th, at 5:45 PM. If that works for you all, right before a 6 o'clock meeting. It should be a simple vote.
Works for us. We've all agreed to it.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Anything else?
Any other questions from any of the commission? If not, we again appreciate your time. Thank you for the good discussion, and back to you.
Okay, thank you. This Board of Commissioners Budget Workshop, it's now 17:33 hours. We will adjourn.